Hello my friends and welcome. Today's story is about a handful of the many Irishmen who fought for Britain during the Great War of 1914 to 1918. In the fight to secure freedom of our friends in Luxembourg, Belgium, and to preserve the integrity of France. Maurice James Dease, who was born on the 28th of September 1889 in Coole, County Westmeath, was educated at Stonyhurst College and the Army Department of Wimbledon College, before attending the Royal Military College, Sandhurst. He was 24 years old, and a lieutenant in the 4th Battalion, the Royal Fusiliers. He was awarded the VC for his actions during the very first week of the conflict in 1914, at Mons, Belgium. Nimi Bridge was being defended by a single company of the 4th Royal Fusiliers, and a machine gun section with Maurice in command. When Maurice had been mortally wounded, Private Sidney Godley offered to defend the railway bridge, while the rest of the section retreated, and was also awarded the VC. He was taken prisoner of war. An eyewitness account was written in the Royal Fusiliers battle records. The gunfire was intense, and the casualties very heavy, but the lieutenant went on firing in spite of his wounds, until he was hit for the 5th time and was carried away. Maurice received the first Victoria Cross to be awarded in the war, and he was awarded it on the very first day of the first significant British encounter in that conflict. Here is the eyewitness account. The machine gun crews were constantly being knocked out. So cramped was their position that when a man was hit he had to be removed before another could take his place. The approach from the trench was across the open, and whenever a gun stopped, Lieutenant Maurice went up to see what was wrong. To do this once called for no ordinary courage. To repeat it several times could only be done with real heroism. Dease was badly wounded on these journeys, but insisted on remaining at duty as long as one of his crew could fire. The third wound proved fatal, and a well-deserved VC was awarded him posthumously. By this time both guns had ceased firing, and all the crew had been knocked out. In response to an inquiry whether anyone else knew how to operate the guns, Private Godley came forward. He cleared the emplacement under heavy fire and brought the gun into action. But he had not been firing long before the gun was hit and put completely out. The water jackets of both guns were riddled with bullets, so that they were no longer of any use. Godley himself was badly wounded and later fell into the hands of the Germans. Also among those to be fatally wounded in battle was Arthur Moore, of Sullivan, a fellow Irishman, from Greystones, County Wicklow. During the Christmas truce of 1914, Arthur and others from his regiment went into no man's land to meet German soldiers and exchange gifts. Arthur fired his pistol at midnight, ending the truce and resuming the war. 6 months later, on Sunday, May 9, 1915, he was killed in the Battle of the Somme. Around 3,500 of the men who died during the war were killed in the Somme, in which more than 1 million soldiers were killed in total. In May 1915, James Kidney enlisted at Ennis in County Clare, into the 8th Battalion Royal Munster Fusiliers. The division he was in took a long time getting to the front. Training was slow because of a shortage of weapons, equipment, and because of difficulties in recruiting for the last brigade, which was the 49th. But following months of training in Ireland, the division left in September 1915 for a final 3 months of training at Blackdown near Aldershot, in Surrey. Training was very poor. It mainly consisted of route marching and limited target practice. After a royal inspection by Queen Mary on the 2nd of December, James's division headed off to France and arrived there on the 18th. The early months of 1916 were spent preparing men for the ordeal of trench warfare. The 16th Division's first deployment was in the muddy trenches around Halouch, in the 1915 battlefield of Loos. Then came the clearing up, and not just of the smashed trenches. An officer of the 7th Leinster Regiment, Lieutenant Lyon, along with James and the others, had the terrible task of gathering the dead. They were in all sorts of tragic attitudes, some of them holding hands like terrified little children. Lieutenant Lyon later described the scene. "Many men died before I could reach them and were gone before I could pass back. There they lay, scores of them, in the bottom of the trench, in every conceivable posture of human agony. The clothes torn off their bodies in a vain effort to breathe, while from end to end of that valley of death, came one long unceasing moan from the lips of brave men, fighting, and struggling for life." On the 29th of April there was another release of gas. At 3:45 a.m., fresh Irish troops were relieving those who had taken part in the previous attack, and suffered casualties. The 8th Munsters were in the process of taking over from the 8th Dublins, when this attack came and lost 3 officers, and 17 men. Small groups of Germans attempted to advance towards the Irish front line but were either shot down or forced to retire by rifle and machine gun fire. Once again, the wind direction changed, and the gas blew back into the German trenches where troops were seen massing for an attack. Abandoning them, the Germans were caught out in the open by Irish artillery and dispersed. Clearing up the mess continued, this time, uninterrupted by German attacks, and the Haluch sector remained quiet for some time. During the 5 months the 16th Division spent in the Luz sector, it suffered at least 6,000, or 50% casualties, including 1,496 deaths. In 1996, members of a Dublin Corporation housing maintenance team were clearing out a house in Blackrock. In the attic of this old house, the men came across a British Army death certificate, and a press cutting of a Private Joseph Pender, of 9th Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers. The date on the death certificate was for the 27th of April 1916. The cause of death was gas poisoning. Joseph Pender was only 17 years of age. Another 17-year-old to die of gas poisoning was Paddy Byrne of Summerhill, in Dublin, who had been in 8th Battalion Dublin Fusiliers. Both boy soldiers are remembered on the Luz Memorial. On both sides of my family, we had young men who fought in that war. On my father's side was my great-grandfather, Thomas, whose name I gave to my eldest son, as his middle name. Then on my mother's side was Sonny, my great-grandmother's son. Her name was Margaret, which is my middle name. As a mother I cannot imagine the anguish she must have felt, having her child so far from home, in such danger, in a place like those trenches, trying not to be killed, and trying to kill some mother's son. A mother like me. Fortunately on both sides they survived. Thomas lived well into his 90s, and I remember him when I was a small girl. He wore an old army overcoat and a trilby hat. He smoked a pipe, and he was rather tall. Then again I was 3 years old, and rather short. My granduncle Sonny went on to join the Irish Army, and served in the Congo, in Africa. I do often sit here and think, if Thomas had not survived then, me, little old Rachel, would not be making this video for you. It's a small world and a short life, so live it well. And that, my friends, is a rather sad story from Ireland's past. Although it's worked out quite well for me. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.